Hey, welcome to our Venture YA podcast. We're so thankful that you're tuning in. I am your host, Rachel, and we have our host, Morgan. And with us today, we have two guests that are actually in our young adult ministry here. So I'll let them introduce themselves. Do you want to start us?
I'll start. My name is Ariel. I am Tony Matar's wife. So he works here at the church, and then I volunteer doing some graphic design. And we have a 10-month-old daughter, Linya.
She's very cute.
She's very cute. She crawled for the first time yesterday. We're very excited. Yeah.
I missed it.
So proud. It's the little things.
I am Kirsten. I have been at the church for 13 years, and then I interned, and then I got hired. I'm his admin and his wife's admin, and I don't have children, so I am also not married. So that's where I'm at in life.
It's
We're
in the
not
works,
bitter.
though,
Well,
right?
yeah.
I mean, the relationship.
Don't
side
hit
of
me
it.
up.
Yeah.
That's not, no.
Not ready to mingle, but
Well, we want to thank you guys for being here, hanging out with us today. Again, thank you for tuning in for our YA podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a totally different direction than we talked about last week. We're going to talk about the 5 love languages this week. And I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 love languages, but essentially, they originated from a book published by an author, Gary Chapman. And you can actually go and find this book on Amazon right now if you need a good read right now in kind of this weird season that we're in. Order it on Amazon. It's a great, great book. But essentially, what it maps out is these 5 ways that we give and receive love. And even as Rachel and I were talking about this, we realized, this is a really important topic as it is, especially in our culture where self-worth, self-identity, depression, all these things that are kind of like internally focused is so important. Understanding the way that we give and receive love is so critical, I think, to our culture, and especially young adults, as we strive to be accepted, as we strive to be loved. And so this book is really just an incredible read on this topic. And for those of you who are unfamiliar on these 5 love languages, we kind of want to just map them out for you so you have a better understanding of what we're going to kind of talk about here to get together today. So the first of the 5 love languages is words of affirmation. This is literally how you and I speak encouragement or speak love to one another. One of the ones that's most important to me, actually, I have a stack of cards in my office desk still of letters written from students in student ministry of just words of encouragement. And I literally just stash those away for when I need them, just put them away and pull those out every once in a while. Rachel, what's the next one that we look at?
The next one, I'll be honest, don't know a lot about and not super comfortable with, acts of service. And basically that, from my understanding, is anything that you do for somebody that kind of keeps them from having to do it. So it saves them time, essentially, because time is super valuable for us. So anything that you do for someone that they would probably have to do themselves, that you're kind of giving them the chance to save that time. So for example, my mom's a super big into acts of service. And so if I do the dishes for her, it's
Boom.
She feels very loved. So that would be an example of an act of service.
Yeah, your boyfriend
her
is an acts of
birthday,
service
too.
person.
He is.
So you're going to have to learn on that.
We can dissect that a little bit later. But yeah, that's been a learning experience because as I introduced it, not my most comfortable one.
The third one that they talk about is physical touch. We can literally just leave that one right there.
There it is.
Especially in the world of social distancing, this isn't going to be a real hot topic for today. But you know how important it is, even if we just remove ourselves from what everyone immediately goes to when they think of physical touch. We even just think about the nature of a hug, holding hands, things like that are so important in showing affection, in showing love, and receiving love. Sometimes those simple little gestures make a huge difference in the way that somebody internalizes what they are receiving from the other person.
Yeah. The next one is gifts. So that's literally pretty much presents that you give someone. But it can also be meaningful gifts that you chose for someone because you thought of them. Or it could literally be just a present for them. So yeah, both ways.
And then the last one is quality time, which I think a lot of these ladies can speak on specifically just in our conversation before this. And we'll talk more about that. But quality time is really just all about that genuine one-on-one, real meaningful conversations and spending one-on-one time with each other. That's so important. So these are kind of the 5 different love languages as we read from this book, and that's kind of where we get them from. But we want to kind of talk a little bit more about these love languages, and specifically maybe some of the things that you guys kind of lean more into, side with one way or another. Rachel, do you want to kind of follow up with them on that?
Yeah, so I guess just off of that, our lovely guests, we're wondering, what are the ways that you feel like you best receive or give love? Because those can look different from one another. So you can speak to both of those if they're different or the same, and just kind of sharing. Yeah.
Mine are the same, giving and receiving. It's just quality time for me. I'm all about time. He who spends the most time wins that's like a common saying, right? No, I've always been quality time since I was a kid. My mom is acts of service. And so she would be sitting in the kitchen. Well, she'd be standing in the kitchen cooking dinner for the family. And I wouldn't even help. I would just sit at the bar stools and just talk to her, like just get to sit there and chat with my mom. And she's like, those are still some of my favorite memories from being a kid. It was just sitting there and talking to my mom while she, as an acts of service person, cooked the food. And I never offered to help because that's not my love language. And I probably should have. And now looking back, I probably should have totally offered to help, but I didn't. I just would sit there and talk. And so quality time for me is a big one. I think I was telling Rachel this earlier. Like when I spend time with somebody, I instantly feel like we're the closest of friends. Like if I spend a good couple hours with someone, I'm like, oh man, like, yeah, we're the best of friends. Like we're so close. And then on the flip side, if I don't see someone or talk to somebody for a while, I think they're mad at me. So that's just
that again is both the give and receive, right?
both,
Like
yeah.
when you give into that, when you feed into that relationship with
feels
quality
so
time,
good.
you feel so close.
So good.
But when you don't get it in return, or when you don't invest in much into
hurts
it,
my heart.
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, same. Love quality time. But one area where Ariel and I are different is I want a lot of quality time with like a few amount of people. Like I love lots of different people. I love every single person in our young adult ministry, like specifically, but in my mind, the way I think about it is I only have so much time outside of work that I have to give to people. I'm going to invest that time to the people who are like so important to me. And and there's like times where I'm like, okay, I want this person. I want to be a friend with them. Like I'm going to go spend time with them. And so that's how I receive love. I also receive love with words of affirmation. I love like cards and compliments. That sounds conceited, but you
look
that's
beautiful
how it
today.
is. Thanks. But that's like really just something like Morgan said, you can go back to maybe I, like Morgan, have a box at home just full of cards, and even if it's a Christmas card or a Christmas card, no one does that, like a birthday card, or I thought of my grandpa, and he sends me birthday cards that say like to my niece, and I'm like, not your niece, Grandpa, that's okay. But
Oh, bless his soul.
So close.
so close. But I like really receive that too. I feel like an overarching thing is just thoughtfulness. Like even though gifts isn't at the top, if you see something, like one of my best friends will just show up at my house with something and she'll be like, I saw this and I thought of you and I just thought you had to have it. And even though I'm not huge on gifts, I'm like, that's so nice of you to like think of that and be thoughtful. And then on the flip side, I give with gifts, and I give, and I'm like, everyone needs a gift basket all the time. Like no one never doesn't need
You
a
are
gift
good
basket.
at making gift baskets too. I
it's a
gotta
passion.
say it. Yeah.
Or even acts of service. Like I want to come clean your room for you, and I want to do your dishes for you, and but that is not. If you do an act of service for me, I'm like, you just wasted your time. Like thanks, but cool.
Rachel, what about you? What are you?
I'll answer that in a
Oh,
moment.
yeah,
but
sure.
I was also thinking of something while you said that I think it's important to note that for many of these love languages, because there's a test that you can take online too to figure out what your love language is, and I've taken it, and acts of service is at the very, very bottom, 0 points. But that doesn't mean that if somebody did an act of service towards me because they were trying to be thoughtful, I'd be like, wow, I don't feel loved at all. Like, I'd probably still feel loved. And I'd
You
be
can't just dismiss the heart behind it and
Exactly.
be like, oh, bummer. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there's still value and you can still feel loved by all of them, but there's definitely ones that you feel more loved.
I think it's in this book, or maybe I've just heard the concept, and this is gonna sound like so cheesy. But like the love tank, is that like in the book, or is I just feel like that term is really
that term
really
is used a lot,
cheesy.
I use it almost every day.
Oh.
So.
Do you feel cheesy when you say it? Like
Oh, no,
my
I
love
just own
tank.
it.
I'm like,
Nope.
oh,
I'm just all in.
I love that though. But I think like each of those acts of service can fill us to a certain extent. I think some of them just like skyrocket to the top, where
Sure.
it's like, oh, this like
Totally.
works a little bit. So but the ones that are our key ones, just like it's an automatic full tank.
But none are going to like
Empty it.
empty your tank.
If you give me a gift, I'm not going to be negative in my
How
tank.
dare you?
Yeah. How dare you do that?
Well, and Kirsten, you said something that I thought was really interesting. You said that, sometimes it's easy to feel conceited when you are a words of affirmation person. And you said that, and immediately I thought, oh man, I've wrestled with that before too. But the key in this is not like, I think even a person in any of these who says, I need more time from you, or I want something from you, like I'm a gifts person. I want, in each of these things, we could see the negative in them, but the goal in the 5 love languages is to see the way that the person receives the gift in the best way. And so the important aspect of that is not to say like, oh, like, it makes you a conceited person because you want people to speak nicely of you. It just means when someone does, it means that much more. The impact of that is felt so much more. Both individual words of affirmation, public words of affirmation, those things really like hold value in the way that you receive those things.
And that's an important point, not only with the love languages, but really with everything in life. It's really not always about you. It's not always about like, how do I need love? It's about, okay, my mom. How does my mom receive love? How does my spouse or my boyfriend receive love? And it's about like learning to love the people around you to the best of your ability.
Oh, I totally agree with that, because one of the things I ask people who are close to me is like, what is your love language? Because I genuinely want to know if I'm going to be in a close relationship with this person, whether it's a friendship or whatever, that dating relationship, marriage, like whatever you're looking at, no matter who you are around, if you know that about someone, like you're just able to be that much more of a support in their life. And so then when it comes around to Morgan's birthday, I don't go, well, Morgan, like, let's all hang out. Instead, I'm like, wow, I'm going to write Morgan a super thoughtful card, because that's going to mean more to him than if I just plan for us all to hang out. Now, would he like that? I'm sure he'd like to hang out, but I think he'd prefer a well-written card from Tony and I. I know we did leave out food as a key love language, because we've kind of inserted that one
number
in.
one.
And I think that's number one
the
for
sixth
everybody.
love
Food is
language.
like a
acts
love
of
language.
service, gifts.
Can be quality time if you sit at a restaurant
Yeah.
together. Food is basically the way you just, I guess not physical touch. You don't really touch somebody if you're eating. That's weird.
A little
But
weird.
you touch the
do that.
food.
Yes.
Whoa.
Well,
Anyways.
Ariel, you kind of bring up a really good kind of a transition. I think both of you guys kind of hit on it. How does your love language like differentiate between the person or the relationship you have with the person? Because obviously, even as we've already discussed, like it seems like it changes based on who you're interacting with. So how does that play out? You even mentioned that you kind of like bring that question into the conversation when you're getting to know somebody.
Yeah.
So talk about that a
I
little
wouldn't
bit.
necessarily say I bring it up like, oh, I just got to know you, and I'm like,
15
hi,
minutes
what's
in.
your love language? But if I know that relationship's going to deepen past, just saying hello when I pass you somewhere, into actual like friendship or relationship, then I definitely look for that. We're trying right now to evaluate, like, it's impossible to know. My child is 10 months old, but we're like, oh, I wonder like what her love language is going to be. And we've kind of deemed that it might be physical touch. Like, and again, it's like impossible to judge this off of a tiny child, but like she's so clingy, and I I'm not physical touch. And I'm like, stop touching me. Don't touch me. But if she's sitting next to you, it's like she has to have a hand on you. She has to be touching you. So I'm even learning that with my daughter and having to adjust for that. But like I would even say my relationship with my daughter, I am more prone to acts of service because that's the relationship dynamic that her and I have. She can't do anything for herself. So one of the ways I show her love is acts of service. But then with my husband, it's more the quality time. And I think learning to adjust your, like how you give. I know like everyone gives it very naturally to whatever their natural love language is giving wise. But I think adjusting that to the person is so important. Like I can't just assume that me giving someone quality time is actually going to fill them. And so that's why I asked that question, is because it's a conversation my husband and I have had a lot in our relationship. He's completely acts of service and I'm like Rachel, like zero. I don't receive love that way. And so I'll come home from work or something and he'll be like, I unloaded the dishwasher, I did the laundry. And I'm like, okay, that's nice. And it like hurts him because he's like, I tried so hard with this acts of service. And I'm like, cool.
See, if Tony did that at my house, my wife would be like, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord. You know, and she'd be like, praising Jesus.
Yeah. No, and so then I'll be like, hey, babe, those are acts of service and I really appreciate those. And I would love, so this is the way I've kind of reframed it in my head, is I was like, I would love, now that we have those things out of the way, that we can now spend some quality time together. Like, thank you so much for getting those things off of our list of things to do. So now we can actually invest in quality time. So just kind of reframing, it's just like puts things in perspective. It's not an end all be all. Like the love language isn't like a cure all for relationships. It's just a helpful guide to guide some of those conversations about why you maybe don't feel loved in a certain friendship or relationship, or why you feel a little bit like there's a tension there. So that's what at least it's helped me with.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, I was just going to jump in when you were talking about you and Tony, just because I have discovered this, and I don't want to answer this whole question myself. I'll let you jump in too. But like, I have a boyfriend now, and there was a long period of time where I did not have a boyfriend. And so my entire, just want everybody to
It
pity
wasn't
me.
that long.
I just want everybody to pity me. Anyways, my point in saying that is like, I focused on the love languages in terms of like my friendships, and the way that I wanted love from my friendships looked a little bit different than it does now that I'm in a relationship. And so that was kind of a learning experience just in that. But also Brian, my boyfriend, is acts of service all the way. And that's like obviously the lowest, like I said, for me. And so it's not my most comfortable way of giving love. And so once we discovered that about each other, I have had to be way more intentional about how I go about showing him love in that way. And like I said earlier, it's not to say that if I were to like say something kind to him or give him like something thoughtful, he wouldn't feel loved. But definitely like the tank thing, he feels like his tank is filling way more when I do an act of service. So often that means for me, and this is just an encouragement to those of you that are in a relationship, that maybe your significant other, the way that they receive love is not comfortable for you to give it. It's completely okay and like healthy to ask your significant other, did that make you feel loved? Was that me showing you an act of service? Because I've had to do that with Brian often. Like, was that like an act of service?
Does that
to you?
count?
Because genuinely, like, I thought an act of service was like, I'm going to clean your house for you. And I was like, that sounds horrible. I don't want to do that. But I've had to, I don't know, just being open with your significant other, or even in a friendship, about, was that making you feel loved in an act of service? Was that doing what would make you feel loved? And then he's able to be transparent, like, yeah, that made me feel so loved. And then I feel encouraged, like, oh, okay, I'm on the right track here. So, yeah.
I totally relate with that because my wife is 100% acts of service to the T. And so, you know, in 10 plus years of marriage, you know, just learning by trial and error mostly, you know, what that looks like, for her. And even like, just to give some basic examples of that. Like my idea of cleaning a bathroom is totally different than her idea of cleaning a bathroom. And so it's not just like doing something, but it's like actually like fulfilling it to her desire. And I think that's the big part of this is it's not just about doing something to check it off the list. It's doing something so that you can give the most to your significant other or to your best friend or to your family member or to whoever that person is. You want to be able to be the best of yourself to this other person that you possibly can, which is the basis of all relationship. Kirsten, one of the things I really respect about you is your relationship with your family. And I know that probably within your family dynamic, there's some differentiating between how your dad or your mom or your sister give and receive love. What has been your kind of learning process of how you can practically give, show love to your family members?
Yeah. Yes, everyone. I have a mom, a dad, and a sister, and we are all very different. And so just the way we're just all so different. So I would say, going off what Rachel said, open communication is so important. And I think that is like an overly used phrase, like communication is important. But I think it's used all the time for a good reason because it is so important. And so I remember when I was getting to be a little bit older, like my dad would sit us down and he'd say, okay, so there have been clean towels sitting on the couch for an hour. No one has put them away. Your mom feels hurt. And I'm like, oh, okay, like, got it. Clean towels, put them away, equals mom feels loved. Okay, and so talking to her about, like, oh, she is, gone to bed for the night, and she hates waking up to anything in the kitchen being dirty, any dishes in the sink at all. It's like, yep, Pastor Di is like, praise the Lord.
Yep.
So even if I'm, like, especially in college when I was up the latest out of everyone, I'd be going to bed and like kind of see it out the corner of my eye and be like, all right, here we go. And my dad and I are pretty similar to where we just want to spend time with each other. Even if that's like sitting in silence, we're just like, yes, this is great. This is a good time. And my sister is huge on words. And so I had to learn at a very young age. My dad would pull me aside. I don't know why he's such a good dad. He'd do all like the teaching moments and say, hey, you said something that was hurtful. She's like devastated. Like that was not okay for you to say. And I'm like, oh, okay, because at that point, words was something that I developed and wasn't as big for me. And so I just think talking to each other about it, and it's okay to say, like if someone asks you, hey, did that make you feel loved? It's okay to say, well, not really. But, like, here's one way that I feel loved. There's no, like, shame in that. And there's also no shame in not trying to be a mind reader. I think a lot of times we just try to, like, observe someone, and just, like, observe my dad and say, okay, he sits alone a lot. Clearly, he just doesn't want to be loved by anything. Like, no, he wants something. I should just ask him and, like, talk to him about it. So, yeah.
On that, I think like what you said about like asking and not just observing, I think that's so important because even we've touched on the difference between how people give and receive love. So like you might observe, like if I just looked at you and observed that you're like, oh, she does all these acts of service and gifts, like I could make the assumption out of that observation that that's how you receive it without asking that question. And so I think that asking it is so important because it does eliminate some of that confusion and helps us have more clarity on how to help people feel more loved.
Yeah, I even feel like it's important too to realize that gifts could look different for different people, or an act of service could look different for different people, or words could look different. It's not just like, oh, that person's a words of affirmation person. I totally know exactly what to do to make them feel loved all the time. I just say the same thing every time. I feel like it varies, and which makes it really hard, and why the communication piece can be so valuable because you get some clarity and you don't feel completely in the dark. So just because of what's happening in our world and thinking about the 5 love languages, and now we're in kind of this time of our life where we have to be distant from one another, social distancing. What do you think the love languages look like in our social distancing world? So right away I'm thinking physical touch might not be so possible. But
that's why everyone has like a top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And so, you can look at someone and say, oh, they love like hugs and like pats on the back, whatever, but they also love this, so I'm going to feed into that, you know?
Totally.
You might have to work a little harder. Honestly, on all of them, you're going to have to work a little harder. It's not going to be natural. It's not going to be, we just ran into each other, or, you know, I was around you so I could say something nice. It's going to be actually intentionally picking up your phone, FaceTiming somebody and spending some time over FaceTime, sending a really well thought out, well written text message, or you know, sending a gift through the mail, like dropping it off at their door. It's going to take a little bit more work. Maybe an act of service. The other night I was just thinking of like, how can I bless one of our youth leaders through an act of service? And I was like, I can make them a meal and drop it off like that. I can't go to their house and clean anything because like we're all quarantined, but I can make something and I can drop it off. So doing what we can, you know, and the physical touch one is super hard because like you're not really around everyone. You might be, I mean, you might have some people in your household you can kind of glean onto. I would say if you are living currently in a home where you know there's somebody of physical touch, they're probably feeling a lack of that. And as somebody who lives in their home, you should probably try to increase that with a hug or a pat on the back or whatever you can do, because it's likely that they're not getting that from their friends or the people that they're used to getting that from. So if you're living in a home with that person, maybe try to increase that. That would be my only thought. That's a harder one. You can't really do any like kissing through the phone. I think there's a song about that.
That is a song.
Kiss me through the phone.
My daughter and I have
banger.
perfected the FaceTime kisses.
Yeah,
so,
FaceTime kisses.
We're pretty big on that.
The kid
but
licks the phone, and
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, it's a kiss. It's fine."
very unsanitary, but
gross.
Yeah,
it's cute.
Clorox
It's
wipe
cute.
that. But I do feel like it's kind of cool just to be able to be creative with how you love someone, and it's gonna look different. And I think everyone's in the same place where we're understanding that, for example, if the way that you feel most loved is by physical touch, I think it would be wrong to say that you wouldn't be understanding of the lack of it. But I definitely think the others, you can get more creative with how you show people in those ways, which is kind of a cool opportunity. So
Did you have anything to add?
Just a little. I like just thinking on the practical side. I, as a quality time person, would love if, like, let's say Josh, my boyfriend at this time, said, "Hey, when this is over, we are going on a date to this place, and it's going to be so fun." And that's like, oh, that is planned, intentional, like thoughtful quality time. So
That's
even
so
if you
good.
can't like fulfill that need immediately, just thinking about, oh, when we're able to do this, like I have a day set aside, we're gonna do this. I sent out cards to some of my friends. I love the written word. I value the written word with a stamp and
Are you
an
talking about the
address.
Word of God, or are you talking about like handwritten cards? What are you talking about here?
I love it all.
The written Word of God?
Not the Word of God. No. I love sending cards, and I've learned that I have friends that love receiving cards. So even if you think about, oh, I have a friend who loves like words of affirmation, maybe needs encouragement, or even if you don't feel like they're like that, but you just want to like bless them and you just want to like cheer their day, cheer them up or whatever while they're stuck at home.
That's really
I
good.
love that.
Yeah, I think when we look at what is happening in our world and we look at specifically like how we give and receive love, I think the thing we just realized is we're gonna have to try harder. You know, both ends of it. And it's not just about how can I give the love, it's also how does the way I receive love need to change based on what's happening around me. And I think all of those things are good questions to ask ourselves. And I hope that, you know, just kind of we wrap up today's podcast is that, you know, whether you're a person who's familiar with the 5 love languages or not, you come away today asking yourself, man, how can I be a better giver into relationships? How can I fulfill relationships better? And not only that, but how can I help someone who is maybe looking for a better way to understand the way that I receive love? How can I communicate to that somebody in a way that helps them understand what really matters the most to me? That can be one of the most frustrating things as I talk to young adults about who are in relationships is like, I don't know what they want from me. You know, like Well, this is a really good way to get a better idea, maybe of what a best friend wants from you, of what a girlfriend or a boyfriend wants from you, a family member, all those different things. But just to kind of wrap up today's podcast, we hope you guys enjoyed the content here. If you guys have any questions, if you have topics, themes, things that you want us to talk about on our Venture YA podcast, please comment below. Follow us on our Venture YA. That's our young adult Instagram account. But we are going to do this podcast every Friday from here on out. So tune in with us next Friday, and we will see you then.